Man, I miss the sound of records like this. This is super kind of organic, kind of raw, but not in a bad sense, because the tone of everything feels realistic to a certain degree because it has a little bit of the extra je ne sais quoi that is part of producing records correctly. So, hello there, girls and boys. We're finally gonna be taking a look at Led Zeppelin. Of course, one of the most important, seminal, quintessential rock bands in history. Some may say the greatest band in history. Do you agree with that statement? I don't know, because I can see why they're so coveted and so loved. But I think it's a little bit too much of astroturfing. But that's my own opinion. And the track in question, the one that we're going to be analyzing, is actually coming from their debut album. The track in question is Good Times, Bad Times. So let's take a listen and let's rock and roll. But before we go, if this is your first time channel, I welcome you, because here we analyze the music that we love from the perspective of an active musician and professional music producer, using language that everybody can understand in a way to expand our knowledge when it comes to music production and songwriting. With that being said, let's rock and roll. Here we go. So here we go. Good Times, Bad Times by Led Zeppelin. Okay, this song is such a classic for many good reasons. The first one is, of course, this is super short. I didn't remember it being less than 3 minutes. It's, so I can see from here, 2 minutes and 49 seconds, kind of. So it's a short track. But in my head, it feels longer because of how probably quintessential rock and roll it is in my head. What I mean by that is that this track is one of the first things that comes to mind whenever I think of the sound of rock music, particularly classic rock, if that makes sense to you. Why? Many things. First and foremost, the drums. The drums have a particular tone to them, don't you think? They are quite kind of fussy, not necessarily that present in the mix. They're not that loud, that's what I mean. Because the guitars are super loud. I didn't remember it being this loud. And it's a track that I have listened to so many times that I can't even remember. But it's the guitar sound is so freaking in the forefront. Sorry, I was about to swear. It's so close to you, so loud that kind of hides the sound of the drums in the backdrop, don't you think? But even though they're kind of far behind, they're not as loud. They're super present in the mix, and they have a particular tone to them. I don't know if you can tell, but there is a little bit of distortion, kind of harmonic saturation that is happening as a result of the recording process. There are many things that are taking place there. It's compression and also saturation coming from the tape machine. A tape machine, of course, for those of you who are not familiar with this, is back in that day, because I didn't even have to work with those when I started off this music business. You recorded to tape, which is basically, as you can imagine, a reel-to-reel machine, and you record your sounds to it. They have a particular threshold on which, when you send a signal that is louder than it is expected, there will be saturation, which is that kind of fuzzy sound. Let me show you with this example. What you got in front of you is a digital recreation of a tape machine. I will be increasing the input of the tape machine in order to simulate a louder drummer, and you will see how much the sound starts to distort the more I push it. One thing, the more you push the signal in, the louder it will become, so I will be trying to compensate for it. And since we understand that something loud would take the sound of any signal to kind of overdrive, which is the term that we use to describe the sound, any form of recording device, such as a tape machine, you can imagine how loud John Bonham was during this recording. That's one of the many traits that made Led Zeppelin the household name they are. John's performances were renowned for being loud and super intense and kind of technical because he's a very, very good drummer in many, many areas. And one of those areas is being loud. Now, the big question is this: who do you think is the best drummer, John Bonham or Keith Moon from The Who? Not gonna tell you which one is my favorite. Maybe I foreshadowed my take, but let me know in the comment section down below because both of them were renowned for being loud and technical. But this is a conversation that will be fun to have. Now, let's play the track back. Let's keep rocking, but pay attention now to the details that are parts of the sound of the guitar. See how loud they are. And a good way for you to start to develop this kind of understanding when it comes to listening to music in this critical fashion is try to position stuff using proximity as a reference point, how close they feel, how close they sound to you, and using the loudness of each of those instruments when comparing them to the others in the mix. That's how you can actually start to make an assessment on how loud the different parts of a song are in reality. Okay, let's continue. Here we go.
I fell in love with a girl as sweet as could be. It only took a couple of days for she was rid of me. She swore that she would be all mine and love me till the end. But when I whispered in her ear, I lost another friend. Oh, good times, bad times, you know I've had my share. When my woman left home for a brown man, but I still don't seem to care. You know I've had my share. When my woman left home for a brown-eyed man, but I still don't seem to care. I know what it means to be alone. I sure do wish I was at home. I don't care what the neighbors say.
Short and sweet, right? Man, I miss the sound of records like this. This is super kind of organic, kind of raw, but not in a bad sense, because the tone of everything feels realistic to a certain degree, because it has a little bit of the extra je ne sais quoi that is part of producing records correctly. One of the things that I like about this album, even though it's kind of low budget sounding, because I think, if I recall correctly, please remind me the story behind it, but I think it was Jimmy Page's an agent and Jimmy Page himself, the ones who paid for the studio time, and they didn't have that many hours. But please remind me, because I'm kind of fussy in that regard. But that shows you that when you got talent, that's a given, of course, but also you got a good idea, and you have quite clear in your head what you want to make out of that idea, magic happens. So, speaking of this, let's take a look at the screen, because we're going to be discussing the sound of the mix. Over here we got Decibel, which is the tool that we are going to use to analyze the sound of our music. In this first section, we got the frequency range analyzer, which describes or presents to us the frequency range starting at 20 hertz all the way down to 20,000 hertz. That comprises how our human hearing can, the range of it, right? How far or how low and high we can hear in relationship to the frequencies projected to us. This white line is showing us how loud each of those frequencies were at its highest point throughout the performance, throughout the playback of the song. And nothing special, nothing surprising. Why? Because this is a record from that particular era. So we got not gigantic bumps on anything. This is one of the reasons why when you listen to classic rock or classical or classic rock is where you're gonna find it. Because when I use classic, I mean stuff that wasn't produced during the late '80s onwards. uh, you can always pinpoint, or you can almost have an idea of where or when that album got recorded due to the sound of it. One of those particularities is the lack of insane low end or super highly detailed high end, which in more audiophile terms would be a warm tone, a warm sound, and also not necessarily punching. Probably that makes sense to you. Let's take a look at the screen again. And you can see it displayed here. This is the area known as the lows. You got the mid range here, and you got the highs. Usually, you're gonna find on the lows, of course, kick drum, bass guitar, which is fantastic. John Paul Jones is one of the best musicians of his generation. That's a fact. Changed my mind. And also, the extremely great interaction that they got, the chemistry behind between John Bonham and John Paul Jones, it's fantastic because you can hear and feel every single kick drum and also every note played by the bass is super ballsy and present. And the tone of the bass is kind of fuzzy, don't you think? A little bit distorted. Very cool sounding. If you happen to know what kind of gear he was using during that recording session, would be great because I love those kind of details. But it has that particular tone to it, a little bit of grit, don't you think? Then you got the rest, which is basically guitars. And as I said before, the guitars are super loud. I didn't remember him being that loud. And also another fact that I was trying to draw your attention to while the track was playing was the fact that the guitars are in stereo. You got a guitar on the left and on the right. Yeah, on the right at least. And those are playing together, but they're not super sharp. You can tell that one is slightly different than the other one. And that creates kind of a groovy kind of thing that adds a lot of character to the track, but also makes the guitar sound thicker and much more punchier. Also, remember what I showed you regarding the drums, that they are kind of distorted because of how loud they were recorded. That distortion kind of allows for the rest of the instruments to mix together uh, based on the fact that the guitar is so loud and it has plenty of saturation as well coming out of the amplifier. So you get this particular cozy texture that makes the entire mix feel so good, don't you think? And again, that's the reason why I miss this kind of recording techniques. It's usually super realistic, not realistic, but organic sounding. That's a better term. Now, what do you think about Robert Plant's vocals? He's a great singer. He's not my favorite singer. That's a matter of opinion, but he's a fantastic singer nonetheless. And his tone in this one is very cool because he also distorts at certain points his takes. You can hear it at certain notes when he goes loud and higher pitched. You can hear the saturation taking place. Again, he was overloading the preamp, the device used to record his voice after the microphone, of course, and even probably hitting the tape machine super hard, giving that particular tone to it. It's everything's so musical to me. It's fantastic. And I wonder how it was when this guy was off the shelf. Well, if you bought it off the shelf when it got released, it gotta been fantastic because you haven't heard something like that before. It might have been bam bam as a kid. If you happen to have the experience, please share it with me because man, I always imagine this being mind blowing. Now let's take a look at the screen again and let's see the second section. Over here we got the dynamic range analyzer. And this is what is going to show us how loud the track has been throughout time. One thing, we're dealing with a remastered version because I couldn't find the original recording on Apple Music, which is the system or the service I like to use for this particular exercise. Why? Because it's the one that provides non-compressed audio, high resolution lossless audio, and at high bit rates. But this remastered version, in my opinion, is a little bit too loud. And the thing is this, when you are making something louder, you have to make the quieter parts louder while pushing down the louder parts. So it sounds even, which allows you to push the output, the final output, a little bit louder. And by doing that, you destroy the difference in between the peaks and the valleys, the points on which you got lower sounds and the ones that you get a louder sound. The louder the signal is, the more interesting for a reason. It's much more exciting. The quieter it is, the much more personal and intimate it is. And you can see why it's important in music and music production, because that's how you can actually add an extra layer of emotional reaction to your music. You can see that even though the track is loud, this was way louder than I remembered, because I owned an old CD copy of this guy before the remaster, because I don't know when this remaster took place. And in my head, probably that's the reason why I feel the sound of the guitars way too loud. In my head, that mix was it was clearly less loud, but also it didn't have this prominence on the guitars. But it might be just me thinking something completely incorrectly. But you can see here on the screen, this blue blob represents the loudest of the track throughout time. The higher it goes, the louder the track was at that particular point. This is the first section, the first minute that we listen together. And you can see here that the beginning was super quiet, but not quiet. It was loud already, but it was quieter than the rest. This is the bam, bam, and you can even see the spikes here, each of the hits. These are the drums. Don't you find that funny? And then you can see how the volume of the entire mix ramps up once the entirety of the band joins in. You can see those moments because there's sort of silence in between the different sections of the track. And let me show you the second half, all the way down to the first chorus, mind you. This is the second half. Bam. We are basically losing the dynamic range. It's almost the same on everything. And this is basically, these points here, I assume this is the guitar solo, clearly. Which is a badass guitar solo when you think. Super, super cool. No wonder why people have Jimmy Page in such a pedestal. Fantastic guitar player and super influential, by the way. And you can see here that once again, coming back to the sound of the mix, it's a bit too loud to the point of it losing a little bit of the beauty of that organic aspect to the music that I was referring to. All in all, it's a fantastic track, such a classic, but this is a sign of how going remastered can damage the integrity of a beautiful song or a beautiful recording, because the song is the same. The song remains the same. Get it? That was a terrible pun, but you get me. The only thing is that the recording itself changed. That's why in audiophile circles you see people actually trying to chase down old versions of or old prints, if I use the proper terminology, of records, because those are, if not basically the same mix or the same master, they're very similar to it. And the thing is that this remaster culture happened once people could go louder in their systems, and without trying to put that much emphasis on this, but this is known as the loudness war. And that period was where everybody was trying to make their records as loud as possible, because that was the style at the time. And it was the style at the time because it was a very effective tool to sell records, because louder is usually better in our heads, believe it or not. That's why I put so much emphasis on the dynamic range. And in this case, I am kind of disappointed because it's a little bit too loud. So there you have it. What do you think about this track? And what do you think about my rant about audiophile stuff? I think it's very important in music to preserve the actual emotion and the actual intent of the artist behind a track. And when the mix is not done correctly, this is a fantastic mix because it's the original one, but when the presentation of the final product doesn't represent the ideas of the musician and the people involved in the production of the album, it's kind of lackluster. Many good things have been ruined. I'm not gonna deny my position in this regard. Many good records have been ruined after the remixes and remasters that have been happening in the last few decades. Now we see, with the advent of streaming services, we're coming back to this kind of sound, actually. Not this particular mix, but they are remixing the remasters because the streaming services are no longer accepting super loud music, believe it or not. So that's why you are seeing so many re-releases of old records on the streaming services. But that will be a conversation for another day. Let me know if you want me to have that conversation with you because it could be fun. And there are many things that could be learned out of it. So please let me know in the comment section down below. As usual, if you like to support this kind of content, the best way to do it is by listening to our music on Apple Music or Spotify, and also by following us on Instagram and X, because that's the best way to get in touch with us in a much more personal basis. And also, we recently launched our own Discord server, so if you happen to understand and know and like to join that Discord, would be awesome, because that's where we spend our time talking about music that doesn't suck, such as this track. So it's more than an invitation, because you're gonna find plenty of useful stuff and also fun conversations to be had, because we got people from all walks of life in there. So the invitation is there. Now the only thing left to be reminded is you should never let anybody tell you what to dream about. And remember that I will see you when I see you.